Hello, I'm Ann Holt, and welcome to Tennessee's Black Heritage. Behind me is Discovering the Civil War, an exhibition on display here at the Tennessee State Museum in Nashville. Now, the highlight of the exhibition is the original Emancipation Proclamation, President Abraham Lincoln's order freeing the slaves in Confederate-controlled parts of the South. The document itself is an important part of American history, and the fact that it's on display here in Tennessee is historic in itself.
A word? Mom. I don't get excited about much.
Guards have to be posted,
but this right here is exciting to me.
Before the relief can leave.
It's not every day you welcome a world-famous visitor.
You took a bath. You took a bath. This is a rehearsal. You have to impress us.
Even if that world-famous visitor is faded pieces of paper.
Oh my goodness. This is probably one of the highlights of our time. We've been doing this for about 6 or 7 years, and all in kind of preparation for this 150th remembrance of the Civil War, and particularly the remembrance of our freedom and emancipation.
Detail, Holt.
So this group of reenactors from the 13th USCT
Guard.
wants to make sure everything is perfect.
Take arms.
Nope. Oh, not supposed to show. Wait for me to come. Oh, to the shoulder.
As they stand watch over the Emancipation Proclamation.
We are a lucky museum to be able to have this.
The Tennessee State Museum is just one of 3 locations nationally to host this historic document.
It can only be in the daylight for a very short period of time. In the locations it has been to, including the opening at the National Archives, it's only out for 72 hours.
But this now delicate piece of paper had incredible power 150 years ago during the Civil War.
What the document says is that all slaves, all people, henceforth shall be free. Now, there were conditions to that. They were applying this document particularly to the Confederate States.
But by this time, Tennessee was already under Union control.
But just imagine, Rose, this was the whole family living here.
Even for slaves who no longer lived in Confederate areas, like here at the Hermitage. The proclamation was important.
Middle Tennessee had fallen to the Union already in 1862. Technically, the emancipation didn't apply here, but it did.
People say it really didn't free anybody. It never freed anybody. Why do you guys celebrate that? Well, put it in the context that the Emancipation Proclamation and the Declaration of Independence have a lot of basis, because just signing the Declaration of Independence didn't make our country free from British rule. They had to fight for it. And that's what we did in 1776. We had to fight for that. The Emancipation Proclamation didn't free everybody. We had to fight for it.
Those former slaves could now join the fight.
By giving this emancipation, it allowed these officers who were fighting a war not to have to return these slaves back to their masters. So in Tennessee, they're saying, okay, we're not officially free, but if you come over here, join the Army, we're not going to send you back.
The legality in Tennessee was not as important as the spirit, as what it meant to those people who had become free, and what it meant to those people who were still fighting on whatever side they were fighting for. It was a change in, I guess you would say, the marching orders to go forward. The Emancipation Proclamation didn't affect Tennessee per se in some ways, but in other ways, it affected every state in the Union and in the Confederacy in a profound way.
But the proclamation was a war act.
After the war was over, there was no more war act, and it could have been reversed totally. So what Abraham Lincoln wanted to do was to make this permanent. It had to be an amendment to the Constitution.
We're stepped out upon the world stage now, with the fate of human dignity in our hands. Blood's been spilled to afford us this moment now.
As portrayed in the film Lincoln, the president knew something more must be done.
Without the 13th Amendment, the Emancipation Proclamation would have certainly been a call to arms. It certainly was the statement of freedom to all people, that all men and women all men shall from this point be free. But the 13th Amendment was the teeth.
So the 13th Amendment was what really freed everyone. But the Emancipation Proclamation opened the door. And if you hadn't done that, you couldn't have done the 13th Amendment. It all ties together. You can't discount one or the other. They all tie together.
And they will be together here as well. The original 13th Amendment will also be on display here in Tennessee.
We believe that we're guided by our forebears, our spirits. They are with us, and they're not far from us. Whatever we're doing, they're looking out for us. We believe this. So we know that they're pleased and happy. You know, I got chill bumps now just talking about it.
I think that speaks incredibly well of the state of Tennessee and incredibly well of a state that was bound and tied in Confederate blood, that we are wanting to say, yes, we want to look at America as a whole today, and we want to have this document, and we want to look at freedom for all people.
The document that freed 4 million people and told the rest of the world that the United States is what it said it's going to be. Liberty and justice for all. And the words henceforth and forever free. That's what it means.
This settles the fate for all coming time. Not only of the millions now in bondage, but of unborn millions to come.
Although the original Emancipation Proclamation will be on display for only the opening days of the exhibit, a replica will replace it, and the original 13th Amendment will remain on display throughout the duration of the exhibition. Next, we'll take you to a Tennessee college, racially integrated more than 130 years before the integration battles of the 1950s and 60s. We often think of racial integration of Southern schools as an event of the 1950s and 60s. But for a small college in East Tennessee, the doors were opened much earlier. Try 1819. Behind the walls of these stately old buildings lies the story of what is likely the first integrated school in Tennessee. Even before the Civil War, there was Maryville College.
Maryville College was one of those colleges in the South that accepted black students. It was a Presbyterian school.
Nestled in the foothills of the Great Smoky Mountains, the school's founding fathers opened its doors to all who lived in the rugged western frontier.
East Tennessee was really a crossroads of the West. It was really the first true sort of frontier. And it was also a melting pot of sorts. You had a Cherokee population that had made accommodations to encroaching white settlement. And you had a relatively small African-American population, a small slave population.
It is here that Isaac Anderson, a Presbyterian minister, found his destiny. He arrived in Maryville the year of the New Madrid earthquakes that shook the entire southern region, leaving behind what some say was fertile ground for saving souls.
The first African-American, is an interesting story, is a man named George Erskine, who was a slave originally from Jefferson County, just east of Knoxville. He was brought into Blount County at some point and was purchased actually by Anderson in 1815 at the Blount County Courthouse and immediately freed. Anderson then trained this man, George Erskine, for the Presbyterian ministry.
The seminary was rechartered as Maryville College. Financially, it struggled, but stayed true to its mission.
Isaac Anderson insisted throughout the antebellum era that it remain open to all colors, to all peoples.
And it did for 42 years. Then came the Civil War. Union and Confederate soldiers occupied the quiet campus and left it in ruin. In the fall of 1866, Maryville College reopened and reaffirmed its commitment to education without racial exclusion. Under the leadership of Thomas Jefferson Lamar, a new campus sprang up, with buildings bearing the names of wealthy northern donors sympathetic to the school's mission. Students came to Maryville from all over the world.
We also had a Japanese student, in fact, 2 Japanese students, some of the first to ever attend college, certainly in this part of the country, a man named Kin Takahashi, who actually was, among other things, was one of the first to introduce football in East Tennessee. We were playing it before the University of Tennessee, in fact.
Another challenge to integration came in 1901, when the Tennessee State Legislature extended segregation of the races to private colleges with racially open admission policies.
Tennessee is an ironic one because Tennessee, it doesn't even have a public school for whites, let alone blacks, and it's calling itself segregating, those private schools.
The leadership of the college fought it. The president fought it as much as possible, but ultimately, the state law prevailed.
2 years later, the board of directors took $25,000 from the college's endowment fund to establish a college for blacks. Swift Memorial College in Rogersville was headed by William Henderson Franklin, the first African-American graduate of Maryville College.
Presbyterian Church is still supporting Maryville, and it's supporting Rogersville, the Swift Memorial College is supporting, and they stopped doing that in 1955. And so the black college closes down, and of course Maryville College can't accept black students again. It still goes on today.
It's something we take pride in. We've always done this. And again, not always smoothly, and we've had internal tensions over it, but it's something that makes us unique.
Maryville College takes great pride in its history, a history of biracial education throughout the turbulent years of turmoil and racial injustice in America. You can learn more about this and all the stories in this program at our website, WKRN.com. Up next, a former slave leads his people to their own promised land. Welcome back to Tennessee's Black Heritage. In post-Civil War Tennessee, many African Americans found themselves stuck in a society with no hope of improvement. For Nashvilleian Benjamin Pap Singleton, the choice was clear: a new life in a new place, a place of hope, a place called Kansas. When the Civil War ended, America was stitched back together, but the wounds were far from healed.
And no one really knew what to do next.
The southern states were in a shamble.
Now suddenly in the midst of all of this defeat, and economic turmoil, and political turmoil, you have 4 million freed slaves.
There's a great problem. These people are destitute. They have no clothes, they have no shoes, they have no education, they have no shelter.
This in a society that's not exactly welcoming.
And there were certain people who were never, ever going to accept a black person as their equal, ever, on no chance of it whatsoever. And the political and personal discontent comes out in a lot of different ways.
Opportunity still seemed a long way off, but a former slave named Benjamin Pap Singleton offered a direction.
He preaches that you don't have to live like this. You can get free land. We can go west to Kansas.
Singleton saw the 1862 Homestead Act as the way out.
You can get 160 acres free. All you got to do is pay a $10 filing fee and live on it for 5 years. Go back to the government office and file it and get your deed, and you permanently own this land.
Operating from offices on this corner in East Nashville and here on Front Street downtown, Singleton becomes a leader of a black exodus from the South.
They print up flyers, Holt to Kansas, west to Kansas, and they post them on telegraph posts, here in the city. And Benjamin Pap Singleton and others who help him, they start having fundraisers. They would have parties, 5 cents.
From the banks of the Cumberland River, he led them.
They are transporting people by the thousands between 1869 and 1881.
First by riverboat to St. Louis, and then by train to places like Topeka, Kansas.
Topeka had so many blacks from Tennessee, it was called Tennessee Town. The northern part of Topeka, Kansas, for a long time was called Tennessee Town.
So many African Americans went west, they became known as exodusters, and Congress took notice.
People in the South began to organize against the movement. They are afraid they're going to lose all this labor. If blacks leave, the cotton industry just collapses, you know. Tobacco industry collapses, you know. The corn and livestock industry, it collapsed.
At a United States Senate committee investigating the Negro exodus from the southern states, Singleton testified to leading 7,432 people himself to Kansas. From his testimony,
And you attribute this movement to the information you gave in your circulars?
Yes, sir. I'm the whole cause of the Kansas immigration.
You take all that responsibility on yourself?
I do. I can prove it. And I think I've done a good deal of good. And I feel relieved.
You are proud of your work?
Yes, sir. I am.
for decades, the Moses of the Southern Exodus was lost to history, reported to have died in St. Louis. Just recently, his final resting place was discovered in Kansas City. Coming up, on the road in the Jim Crow South. For African Americans motoring the roads of the segregated South, travel could quickly become a dangerous venture. But in Nashville, Black entertainers on the road had a refuge, a safe place to stay in an unlikely location. All day and all night, they're pressing records at Nashville's United Record Pressing, and have been since 1949. The pressing machines never stop, but upstairs and down this hall, time stands still.
The room that we're in is part of what we now call the Motown Suite. The company's two largest clients were Motown and VJ, who had predominantly black artists and black executives. And at that point in time, there were few, if any, hotels in Nashville that would accept those individuals due to the color of their skin. So the company was good and forward-thinking enough to create this space to offer to those individuals so they'd have a safe place to stay.
For African Americans in the segregated South, travel could be tricky.
As the story goes, a lot of when the executives would come, some would be to do business and talk about business deals. But yeah, aside from that, there would be, the bands that would come through town, and yeah, they didn't have a place to stay, and they knew that this was here, and the company was happy to offer it to them.
Lodging was one of the problems, yes, it was.
Clifford Curry hit the road right after high school with the Fabulous Six.
Back then, man, sometimes you had to worry about where you're going to stay, or either do your shows in that town and leave and go to the next town that you thought had adequate facilities for you to stay in.
There were also hazards along the way.
We was traveling at night, and about midnight or a little after midnight, and the guy pulled in the gas up. And we were all asleep, and I wasn't thinking. Just a normal thing. There was a bunch of guys in the car, and everybody went to use the bathroom. And I had too. Wasn't thinking at all. Wasn't thinking about nothing, And then here's the guy coming out on the station, standing out with a baseball bat in his hand, hitting it against his palm of his hand. Told me, who told you to go and use that bathroom?
A nice, safe place to stay was a luxury. One United Record Pressing was happy to supply.
Common question is, who exactly stayed here? And the history, unfortunately, wasn't documented very well because they didn't get the full cultural significance or impact of what they were doing. To them, they were just doing what seemed like the common sense thing to do. You take care of your customers regardless of the color of their skin.
Motown founder Barry Gordy stayed here, and they know many others did as well. sleeping in the suite's bedroom.
That I like to call the I love Lucy bedroom because it's got the 2 single beds.
Drinking coffee in the kitchen, hanging out in the living room.
And throughout the suite, most of the furniture is the same furniture that was here when we hosted those individuals.
Even a pair of shoes someone left behind.
And those shoes have been there probably 30 to 40 years now, and basically the company has changed hands a couple times, and at one point one of the gentlemen purchasing the company saw the shoes there and liked the mystique, like maybe they're Stevie Wonders, or like maybe they're the janitors, but who knows. These walls could talk, you know, the old cliche, because I'm sure there's a lot of stories of you know, who all stayed here, and we certainly wish we knew all of them.
Thanks for joining us on this trip through Tennessee history. There are so many incredible people and stories to discover that make up Tennessee's Black heritage. From the Tennessee State Museum, good night.